what was your understanding that, okay, what was the major challenge that you faced and why you could not clear?
My major challenge was that I was still new to the working environment and I was trying to juggle a job while also trying to study for a very difficult and high end professional exam like this one.
Now, when you started the preparation again, okay, so how did you change your approach?
This time I changed my approach by
So, how many hours you were giving every single day to prepare?
every single day when I was still working, I would give minimum of 1 hour. So in the last 1.5 months, I was studying around 6 to 10 hours a day.
When you were reading, so which book you felt was slightly tough for you, or which book was slightly easy for you?
I felt that the hardest book was actually the last book, which is Valuation and Risk Management, because it is completely different than anything I'd ever studied.
Out of 100 questions, how many questions on an average were tough for you in the exam?
On an average, I would say around 25 to 30 questions, I had a slight doubt in the answer that I had chosen. So I had flagged them for later.
And whether time management was an issue in the exam?
Yeah, for sure, time management is an issue because you can't predict what the arrangement of the questions is, because sometimes.
Hello guys, I hope everybody is doing good. Hi, this is Ganesh Nayak. I help finance professionals and students to excel in their career and become a better version of themselves. And I also help students who are preparing for competitive exams in finance like CFA, FRM, SCR, CIA, and ACCA. Now, I have with me one of my students who has been able to clear the FRM Level 1 exam in the May 2025. And she's going to be talking about her journey of preparing for the exam. Okay. So, Ashwini, first of all, thank you very much for taking out time. If you can give a brief, when did you decided to go for FRM? What was your educational background and all of that?
Great, thank you, sir. So my background is that I did my BCom at a tier one college, and my decision to take the FRM level one was because I was looking at what my prospective career goals were and what particular field that I wanted to get into, which is when I heard about some of the international programs like CFA and FRM, and I liked what the FRM syllabus teaches and what my prospective career paths were after taking that exam. So after I graduated from my BCom, I worked for 1 year at a startup. I was doing the sales function mostly, and I stepped away so that I could actually focus on my career goals, which included giving the FRM Part 1 exam.
Okay. And you appeared for the Level 1 exam in August 2024, first time.
Yes, that was my first attempt, which I was not able to clear successfully. So I gave it another shot in May 2025.
Now, over here in the first attempt, what was your understanding that, okay, what was the major challenge that you faced and why you could not clear?
My major challenge was that I was still new to the working environment and I was trying to juggle a job while also trying to study for a very difficult and high end professional exam like this one. So, one lesson I learned is that I cannot keep a priority for one thing while not prioritizing the other, because both of them are really important. And a lot of people who try to give the FRM are also working professionals. So, they might find it hard, but you have to give that commitment when you want to give the exam. So I like that I had corrected myself when I had to appear for the second part.
So in the first attempt, the consistency was not there.
Yeah, the consistency was not there and I was not able to find a lot of time to commit to preparing for the exam.
Okay. Now, after the exam result came out, you could not clear. Now, when you started the preparation again, okay,
Yeah.
so how did you change your approach?
This time I changed my approach by a making sure I was uh, doing all the readings, watching all the videos, whatever available resources I had, I was making full use of that. And I tried my best to minimize the breaks that I took in between my education, because sometimes it happens when someone is working that they might face a deadline at work, so they are not able to give a lot of commitment to their studies. This time I tried to minimize that as much as I could. So even if I was having a busy work week, at least on the weekend, I would make sure to study one new topic.
Okay. And when did you complete your entire portion this time?
I had completed my entire portion around the last week of April.
Okay, okay. And when what about the solving the question bank?
Yes, chapter wise questions, I was actually doing it after I had completed the chapter so that the topic could stick
Okay.
better in my head.
I think so. You was talking about the mock papers in the last 15 days,
Yes,
correct?
mock papers and making sure that any topics that I might have forgotten previously, I was getting it revised.
Okay, interesting. And in this entire journey, okay, so how many hours you were giving every single day to prepare?
Every single day when I was still working, I would give minimum of 1 hour, either in the morning or at night, and at weekend I would study for 2 to 3 hours. That increased as the deadline of the exam approached. So in the last 1.5 months, I was studying around 6 to 10 hours a day. And the days before the exam, it must have been around 10 to 12 hours, including solving mocks.
Wow, okay. 10 to 12 hours a day. And how many mock papers did you solve for the exam?
I solved four papers properly. Two were from GARP and two were the ones that you had provided in your study bank. And I had also gone through one mock GARP paper that I had found in like some archives.
What was the average score you were getting in those mock papers?
My average score was actually very low at first. I was getting somewhere between 48 to 55, but my last mock I scored above 60.
And you were confident with that number?
I was not fully confident, but I knew that I had given enough preparation that I could have, and I knew that the topics would come back to me on the day of the exam if I just give a little belief to myself.
Okay.
I felt that the hardest book was actually the last book, which is Valuation and Risk Management, because it is completely different than anything I'd ever studied in college or in school. And the easiest would have had to be the first book because it is theory, and the way that it was explained was kind of like a story. So I was able to understand what the points of crisis were.
And when you went to the actual exam now, were you more confident as compared to the first attempt?
Yes, for sure.
And how did you started the solving when you started the exam for the second attempt now?
So I had started the solving. I just took it very slowly and very easily because one thing about me is that sometimes I freak out in situations, especially if I don't know the answer. But this time I tried to do it as calmly as possible. So in the first hour, I was able to attempt around 30 questions. So my pace was going decent. I used to flag any questions that I had doubts in so that at the end I could come back and clear them.
Okay, okay. And overall, how many theory, how many calculation questions were there in your paper?
It was definitely a bit more theory heavy, and they were asking questions from random nooks and corners of the textbook that you will not imagine will be tested. And the numericals were around 15 to 20% of the entire question bank.
And you were confident on that numerical?
Numericals, I wasn't feeling a little confident because at the time of attempting the exam, some of the formulas that I had learned were getting muddled up in my head. But theory was really good for me.
Out of 100 question, how many questions on an average were tough for you in the exam?
On an average, I would say around 25 to 30 questions, I had a slight doubt in the answer that I had chosen. So I had flagged them for later.
Okay, and the rest 70 were good. You were able
They
to
were pretty
be
fine.
confident you were basically.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And whether time management was an issue in the exam?
Yeah, for sure, time management is an issue because you can't predict what the arrangement of the questions is. Because sometimes maybe the first 25 questions might be too easy that you get the answer in an instant, but the next 25 questions might have some calculations to do. So I felt that like I was able to complete everything, but I only had maybe 10 minutes to actually sit and go through any of my problem questions.
Okay, okay. And one thing that you really enjoyed in your entire preparation journey, and one thing which you could have improved in your preparation.
Yeah, one thing I really enjoyed was the actual learning itself because one of the motives that was behind me pursuing the FRM was because I really liked the syllabus and I genuinely wanted to get a deeper understanding of financial risk. One of the
Okay,
challenges that I faced was that if I wasn't revising a topic, say if I had studied something in my first month of preparation, I was barely able to recall it in my final month. So revision was something that was definitely needed.
now if I ask you what were the quartiles that you got, if do you remember that quartiles?
Yeah, I remember my quartiles. I scored first quartile in quants and two in the remaining in the last two subjects, which is FMP and valuation. In my foundations, however, I had scored 3, which was a little unexpected, but it's still okay.
So it's 3-1-2-2 basically.
Yeah, 3122.
Okay. And do you have a quant background by any chance? Stats quant
Not
background?
a very strong quant background,
Okay.
mostly finance background only.
Okay. Okay. Now, if I ask you from your experience, how should somebody prepare for FRM level one? Three tips, four tips from your side.
Yeah. So, three tips I would say that are absolutely non negotiable is that when you are studying, make sure you do not skip out on anything, because a lot of times you might, based on your background, you might feel confident in certain topics. Like, say, if I, because I'm a finance background, I feel that I'm confident in FMP, but that is not the case. You have to make sure you go through each and every single topic, and even if it's very hard for you to understand it, at least have a gist of it, because you might never know, in the exam it might actually come to your help when you're trying to solve a question pertaining to that topic. The second one is revision. I used to do
Yeah.
this thing where whenever I'm doing any daily mundane task like taking a shower or making food, I used to try and revise the concepts in the back of my head so that it would actually stick and I would not forget it. And this is very crucial in the last month of preparation also, because of how vast the syllabuses, you tend to forget some topics. So revision is just always needed. And the third one is to not underestimate yourself, because when I had started giving my mocks, I was facing low scores, so I was feeling very anxious and antsy about how my actual exam day would go. But when I was giving my exam, I felt that it was not that different from the mocks. The questions were a mix of straightforward and like tricky. So I would say that having faith in yourself is the most important thing when giving the exam, because if you do not have that faith, it's very easy to freak out and not be able to think with a clear mind on the day of the exam.
One final question.
Yeah,
So when you didn't clear, because it takes a lot of effort to take that decision that I'm going to appear again, read the content again.
true.
What was going on in your mind at that point in time?
At that point in time, I had already like made acceptance of my failure, because I knew that there were some areas in which I had really lacked, like say the preparation was less, or the time I had given to actually master the content was really less. So I knew that if I would just give it one more shot, I would be able to get a better score if not clearing.
Wonderful, wonderful, Ashwini. I mean, this conversation will be really helpful for a lot of young students who are planning to go for the exam for the next attempt. Because when they see people with the same background, same struggle, they have been able to clear the exam, so it motivates them. It gives them some direction. So again, thank you very much for taking out time and talking to us, because this conversation will be really, really helpful for all the students who are going to prepare for the exam.
No problem, sir. Thank you for having me.